Sweetheart, if you knew how to read, you wouldn't be here. That venomous little gem was Judge Ronald Kincaid's opening line to the young woman standing before him last Tuesday in the sterile confines of Room 4B. A smirk played on his lips. A ripple of sycophantic chuckles spread through the gallery, and then the gavel came down, a sharp, almost violent crack that echoed through the hushed courtroom. What Kincaid, in his puffed-up arrogance, didn't know was that every single syllable he uttered, every condescending glance, every cruel chuckle, was being meticulously live-streamed, not to some public broadcast, but to a secure federal task force server. And the woman he so casually dismissed as just another pretty face, a mere common defendant, was actually Special Agent Maya Dawson. She's the youngest undercover operative the Inspector General's office has ever field certified, a legal prodigy disguised as a pawn. By the time the sound of that gavel had even begun to fade, Kincaid's illustrious, corrupt career was already in tatters. He just hadn't been told yet. The mockery. Court transcripts, which would later become damning evidence, revealed the true extent of Kincaid's contempt. He'd opened the hearing with a snide joke about Maya's bright yellow cardigan, a garment chosen specifically for its visibility on grainy security footage. "Looks like my granddaughter's preschool sweater," he'd sneered, eliciting another round of forced laughter from his usual courtroom cronies. When Maya, with a composure that belied her youth, politely corrected his mispronunciation of her last name, Dawson, not Dawson, he rolled his eyes with exaggerated theatricality. "Well, Dawson," he drawled, leaning back in his imposing chair, a predatory gleam in his eyes, "since you're such a legal scholar, why don't you lecture us on reasonable doubt?" The public defender, a weary man who had seen Kincaid's act countless times, attempted to object, but the judge cut him off with a dismissive wave, relishing his unchecked power. For the next 8 agonizing minutes, Kincaid held court, not on matters of law, but on a personal vendetta against Maya. He mocked her age, barely concealing his disdain for her youth. He criticized her attitude problem, a convenient label for any defendant who dared to show an ounce of self-respect. He even ridiculed the way she tied her shoes, Velcro sneakers, a deliberate choice, part of a thrift store disguise designed to make her look broke, vulnerable, and utterly beneath him. Maya, however, kept her head high, her gaze steady, absorbing every insult. Each slapdown was met with a calm, almost robotic "Yes, Your Honor," a phrase that grated on Kincaid precisely because it denied him the dramatic reaction he craved. All the while, tiny, almost invisible microphone, sewn meticulously into the collar of that infamous yellow cardigan, soaked up every single word, every cruel intonation, in pristine 32-bit glory. The atmosphere in the courtroom was thick with unspoken tension. Half the gallery was cringing, visibly uncomfortable with the judge's performance, their eyes darting between Kincaid's sneering face and Maya's impassive one. The other half, the seasoned regulars, had seen this circus before. They knew better than to react, their faces carefully blank, their bodies rigid with practiced indifference, lest they become the judge's next target. By the end of his tirade, Kincaid, fueled by his own unchecked ego, sentenced Maya to a wholly arbitrary 10 days for contemptuous body language. He punctuated his pronouncement by banging the gavel so hard that a distinct, ominous crack split its wooden handle. It was a sound that would soon prove deeply symbolic, because his own armor, the facade of his authority, was about to split wide open, revealing the rot beneath. Section 2, the assignment. Just 3 weeks earlier, a hushed conference room located 3 floors above this very courthouse, Maya had received her briefing. It was for an operation codenamed Gavelfall. The air in that room had been thick with the scent of stale coffee and the weight of systemic corruption. Internal audits had painted a damning picture. Judge Kincaid had dismissed over 200 cases, an astonishing number, all tied to a powerful private prison conglomerate. The pattern was unmistakable and sickeningly predictable. Each dismissal followed suspiciously large campaign deposits funneled to Kincaid's re-election fund. Whistleblowers, brave but terrified individuals, had come forward, describing a courtroom that Kincaid ran less like a bastion of justice and more like a cruel reality show. His modus operandi was simple. yet devastatingly effective. Berate the weak, reward the rich, and pocket the difference. The problem, the lead agent explained to Maya, was that every formal complaint, every piece of paper that dared to challenge Kincaid's authority, seemed to vanish from the clerk's docket with alarming regularity. It was a well-oiled machine of obstruction, designed to protect the judge and his cronies. The task force needed someone extraordinary for this assignment. They needed someone young enough to look like a typical, vulnerable defendant, someone Kincaid would instinctively underestimate and dismiss. They needed someone sharp enough to quote obscure code sections and legal precedents without missing a beat, someone who could subtly challenge Kincaid's legal pronouncements. And perhaps most critically, they needed someone calm enough, resilient enough, to endure Kincaid's relentless insults without flinching, without breaking character. Maya fit the profile perfectly, almost eerily so. She stood at a modest 5'2", possessed a naturally soft-spoken demeanor, and by her own right admission, looked like the babysitter you pay extra because she shows up on time. This unassuming appearance was her greatest weapon, but beneath that gentle exterior lay a formidable intellect and an iron will. She had graduated at the very top of her law school class at the astonishing age of 20, a feat in itself. The following week, she had shot perfect scores on the federal range, demonstrating a different kind of precision. Her mind was a steel trap, her aim deadly accurate. They gave her a meticulously crafted cover, a fake shoplifting charge, a slightly oversized hoodie to complete the look of a down-on-her-luck youth, and a crucial directive: 30 days to bait a bully. 30 days to gather enough irrefutable evidence to bring down a corrupt judge and dismantle his entire network. It was a high-stakes gamble, but if anyone could pull it off, it was Maya Dawson. 30 days of listening. Every morning, for 30 long and arduous days, Maya would arrive at the courthouse, blend seamlessly into the background, and take her seat in the back row, a seemingly innocuous figure scribbling diligently in a beat-up notebook. But that notebook was far more than it appeared. It was a meticulously kept log of corruption. She wasn't just observing. She was dissecting the entire ecosystem of Kincaid's court. She recorded the hushed, illicit side conversations, attorneys, slick and predatory, trading wads of cash in the hallway, their voices barely above a whisper. She documented bailiffs, the supposed guardians of order, openly coaching defendants to waive their right to counsel, ensuring quicker, less scrutinized convictions. She heard Kincaid himself, off the record, joking with his staff about auctioning off probation slots, a chilling casualness about selling freedom. Maya learned the dirty secrets of everyone connected to Kincaid's operation. She identified which clerk, with practiced nonchalance, shredded exculpatory evidence after hours, erasing any chance of justice for the accused. She discovered which stenographer, with a flick of a key, edited transcripts to favor the judge's narrative, twisting words and manufacturing consent. She even pinpointed the probation officer who routinely doctored drug screen forms, ensuring that certain individuals remained entangled in the system, ripe for exploitation. And that yellow cardigan? It wasn't just a fashion statement. It was a beacon. She wore it every single day. A splash of vibrant color in the drab courthouse, precisely because yellow shows up so clearly on grainy security footage. It made her movements, her presence, her interactions easy to timestamp, easy to track, providing an undeniable visual anchor for all the illicit activities she was documenting. At night, after the courthouse emptied and the corrupt slumbered, Maya would upload her findings to a secure cloud folder, an ever-growing repository of evidence she playfully labeled Sweater Sessions. By week 2, the task force had already amassed enough evidence to indict half the courthouse staff. The low-hanging fruit, as her supervisor called it, was ripe for the picking. But they weren't interested in just pruning the branches. They wanted the root. They wanted the top of the pyramid, Judge Ronald Kincaid. So Maya pushed further, deliberately escalating the game. She began to file handwritten motions, ostensibly representing herself. These motions were riddled with what appeared to be innocent errors. A wrong county seal here, upside-down exhibits there, even strategically placed coffee stains that looked like careless accidents. Kincaid, predictably, took the bait every single time. He seized on every perceived mistake, every apparent sign of her incompetence, using them as fresh ammunition for his public humiliations. Each tirade, each condescending remark, each theatrical display of outrage from the bench inadvertently added another brick to the towering wall of obstruction of justice counts the federal agents were meticulously stacking against him. Maya, ever the strategist, kept a meticulous tally of these transgressions. On the inside of her thrift shop sneaker, a tiny, almost invisible ledger grew, marking each federal violation. By the end of week 3, she had counted 27 separate federal violations directly attributable to Kincaid's behavior. She called them her Velcro souvenirs, a quiet, defiant nod to the cheap shoes that carried such heavy secrets. The weight of the evidence was becoming undeniable, and the trap was slowly, inexorably closing. CTA 1. Hold up, just a quick pause. If you're as fed up as I am with powerful people punching down, with those in authority abusing their positions, then do me a favor. Tap that like button, smash it even, so the algorithm knows you want more stories exactly like this. Stories where arrogance meets accountability, where the little guy, or in this case, the seemingly little guy, gets to flip the script. And if you really caught that sneaky reference to Maya's shoe tally, drop a Velcro in the comments. Let's see who's paying attention. Alright, enough of that. Back to the takedown. Section 4, the trap. The final hearing, the culmination of Maya's undercover work, was strategically scheduled for a notoriously light docket. Only 6 cases were on the schedule, a deliberate choice by Kincaid to ensure he could grandstand, to perform his usual cool theater without having to share the spotlight. Maya's plan was audacious, precise, and brilliant. She would deliberately trigger a contempt citation, on camera, forcing the judge to sign it himself. This signed order, issued by Kincaid himself, would provide the task force with a perfect, irrefutable arrest warrant under 18 U.S.C. Section 401, detailing the specific offense of contempt against the authority of the court. She arrived 20 minutes early, a subtle deviation from her usual timing, carrying a motion that looked innocuous but was, in fact, a carefully constructed legal bomb. It quoted a Supreme Court case, one that Kincaid had brazenly misused and misrepresented just the prior week in another hearing. This was her trigger. When her turn finally came, she approached the bench, her posture deferential but her eyes unwavering. Before Kincaid could even acknowledge her, before he could launch into his usual dismissive preamble, Maya spoke, her voice clear and calm, cutting through the courtroom's usual hum. "Your Honor," she began, her words deliberate and precise, "I believe the court misstated the holding in Timms versus Indiana." The room froze. It wasn't just the words. It was the audacity, the quiet confidence that defied everything Kincaid expected from a young, helpless defendant. Kincaid's face, usually a mask of smug superiority, flushed a deep, mottled red. He sputtered, his carefully constructed facade cracking under the unexpected challenge. Then, as if on cue, his rage took over, and he launched into the now viral monologue, the very words that would seal his fate. "Sweetheart, if you knew how to read, you wouldn't be here." Every insult that followed, every condescending remark, every belittling phrase, was another knot tightening the legal noose around his own neck. He was digging his own grave, live on camera, with every word. He found her in contempt, as she knew he would. His hand, shaking slightly with barely contained fury, scrawled his signature onto the order. And then, with a final, desperate flourish of his rapidly diminishing power, he slammed the cracked gavel one last time. The sound was a dull thud, a stark contrast to the sharp crack from weeks before, signaling not just the end of her performance, but the end of his reign. Maya, her mission accomplished, offered a polite "Thank you, Your Honor," a phrase dripping with irony that Kincaid, in his blind rage, completely missed. She then calmly tucked the yellow cardigan, her undercover uniform, around her shoulders, a silent victory flag. With deliberate, unhurried steps, she walked towards the bailiff's hold, a picture of serene defiance. Outside the courtroom, a whirlwind of activity was already in motion. Federal agents, who had been listening to every word, watching every gesture, were already moving in, their movements precise and coordinated. The net had been cast, and Kincaid, utterly oblivious, was caught. Section 5, the reveal. Inside the drab, impersonal holding cell, Maya remained perfectly composed. When the bailiff, a burly man accustomed to the judge's petty cruelties, asked if she wanted to make her one phone call, she simply smiled. "If it's all the same to you," she replied, her voice sweet as honey. "I think I'll save it until after lunch." The bailiff, shrugging, saw no reason to argue. Kincaid's policy, a small act of psychological torture, was to make contemnees sweat, to feel the weight of his power. He had no idea he was playing right into Maya's hands. At precisely 12:17 p.m., with a casual flick of her wrist, Maya finally dialed her attorney. 3 minutes later, the courthouse, usually a hive of controlled chaos, was gripped by an entirely different kind of energy. U.S. Marshals, a phalanx of stern-faced federal law enforcement, entered through the employee elevator, sealing off the judge's private corridor. There would be no escape, no last-minute shredding of documents, no hushed phone calls to corrupt associates. They moved with swift, surgical precision. The stenographer was the first to go, arrested at her desk, her face draining of color as the charges of obstruction for tampering with transcripts were read. The clerk followed shortly after, found attempting to discreetly dispose of a box of documents. Evidence destruction, a federal offense. When they finally reached Kincaid's chambers, the scene was a grotesque tableau of his hubris. He was mid-sentence on a Zoom fundraiser, holding court for a virtual audience of wealthy donors, his voice booming with false bonhomie as he joked about owning his courtroom, about how he kept the riffraff in line. The marshal knocked once, polite but firm rap, then twice, louder, more insistent. Kincaid, annoyed by the interruption, waved a dismissive hand at his assistant, but before anyone could answer, the door swung open. "Judge Ronald Kincaid," the lead marshal announced, his voice devoid of emotion, cutting through the judge's jocular pronouncements like a knife. "You are under arrest for depriving individuals of rights under color of law, conspiracy to obstruct justice, and accepting gratuities in exchange for official acts." Kincaid initially laughed, a short, incredulous bark of a laugh, thinking it was some elaborate prank, perhaps a colleague's idea of a joke. He laughed until the cold steel of the handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists, right there, live on Zoom, in front of 120 online donors. The feed, a digital witness to his downfall, clipped exactly as his triumphant, arrogant grin collapsed, replaced by a mask of pure, unadulterated shock and terror. That freeze frame, captured for eternity, is now the banner image plastered across every major news site, a stark monument to his spectacular fall. Section 6, the walk back. With Kincaid's reign abruptly ended, Special Agent Maya Dawson was escorted from the detention wing, not through the public corridors, but through the same discreet side door Kincaid himself had once used to sneak lobbyists and favored donors into his chambers, away from prying eyes. It was a walk of quiet triumph, and she wore the yellow cardigan, her humble undercover uniform, not just as a piece of clothing, but like a victory flag, fluttering gently in the breeze of justice. In the hallway, a gauntlet of reporters and curious staff parted for her. She met the gaze of the public defender, the same man Kincaid had gleefully humiliated for years, cutting him off, dismissing his objections, making a mockery of his efforts to represent the vulnerable. The public defender, his eyes shining with unshed tears, simply nodded, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you," he managed. "Thank you for giving us our voices back." It was a simple phrase, but it spoke volumes about the fear and oppression Kincaid had instilled in the courthouse. Maya, her own eyes now glossy with a mixture of relief and exhaustion, nodded back. She pulled a Sharpie from her pocket, and with a flourish, signed the back of her yellow sweater. Her message, etched in black ink, was both poignant and defiant. Justice is yellow, hard to miss, harder to ignore. Then, she gently handed the signed cardigan to the public defender, a tangible keepsake of a battle won. It now hangs, proudly framed under plexiglass, in the regional defender's office, a vibrant splash of defiant color against the institutional beige of the walls, a permanent reminder that even the smallest acts of courage can dismantle the largest structures of corruption. Section 7. The Evidence Dump. By 6 p.m. that same evening, the Department of Justice, moving with an efficiency that sent shivers through the legal community, uploaded a comprehensive 42-page indictment against Judge Ronald Kincaid. It wasn't just a legal document. It was a bombshell, a meticulously compiled narrative of his corruption, a story told through irrefutable facts and damning evidence. The highlights were jaw-dropping, painting a picture of systemic graft and blatant abuse of power. There was irrefutable proof of $340,000 in campaign donations, meticulously traced back through a labyrinth of shell companies, all ultimately linked to the private prison conglomerate that had benefited so richly from Kincaid's rulings. There were audio recordings, chilling in their casual criminality, of Kincaid himself promising easy dockets and favorable outcomes to his donors, his voice oozing with a sense of untouchable power. And perhaps most damningly, there was security footage, grainy but undeniable, of Kincaid on a Saturday, alone in his chambers, meticulously shredding exculpatory letters, evidence that would have exonerated innocent defendants. But the real showstopper, the piece of evidence that broke the internet, was a short, shaky selfie video. Maya, in a moment of pure genius and daring, had filmed it herself from the jury box, her phone discreetly held, capturing Kincaid in the act. The footage clearly showed him pocketing a casino chip voucher, brazenly labeled campaign contribution, while court was actually in session, his back to the gallery, thinking no one was watching. That single 15-second clip alone clocked an astonishing 3.2 million views within 8 hours of its release. Twitter, with its insatiable appetite for outrage and schadenfreude, turned Kincaid's downfall into an instant meme. The caption, universally adopted, read, "When you think you're the house, but the house always wins." Kincaid's own Facebook fundraiser page, once a hub for his wealthy supporters, rapidly transformed into a digital comment graveyard, flooded with furious donors demanding refunds, their collective embarrassment palpable. By midnight, the state legislature, reeling from the scandal and facing immense public pressure, announced immediate impeachment hearings. All of this seismic shift in the halls of power, happened because one quiet woman listened more than she spoke, observed more than she reacted, and collected evidence with unwavering resolve. Section 8. The fallout. The repercussions were swift, brutal, and far-reaching. Within a mere 48 hours, the state Supreme Court suspended Kincaid without pay, his judicial robes stripped away, his authority vanished. His former law clerks, with a mix of relief and disgust, scrubbed his picture from the courthouse wall, erasing his physical presence as quickly as his reputation had been obliterated. The ripple effect spread beyond the courthouse walls. Prison contract companies, deeply implicated in scandal, saw their stock dip a significant 12%, a clear signal that the era of unchecked influence was, for now, over. Social media sleuths, those tireless digital detectives, unearthed a 2011 blog post Kincaid had written, a relic of his earlier, more arrogant days. In it, he had brazenly bragged, "A judge who fears headlines has no business on the bench." The irony was not lost on anyone. Screenshots of the post circulated wildly under the hashtag #NoBusiness, a searing indictment of his hypocrisy. Maya, meanwhile, found herself trending under hashtag #VelcroVeronica, a nickname she privately found utterly ridiculous, but one that stuck. Late-night hosts, always quick to seize on a juicy scandal, had a field day roasting Kincaid for mocking Velcro when his own entire career, they quipped, had been held together by corruption tape and shady deals. But beyond the schadenfreude and the headlines, there was real, tangible justice being served. At least 180 old cases presided over by Kincaid were immediately put under review, each a potential casualty of his corrupt system. 37 convictions, previously considered final, were overturned within days, breathing new life into shattered lives. One such individual was Javier Ortiz. He had spent 18 months in jail, his life put on hold, all for a simple traffic ticket, because he couldn't afford a $250 surcharge Kincaid had levied. Javier walked free on Thursday, clutching the yellow cardigan news, clipping like a precious ticket to a new life, a tangible symbol of hope. His story, just one of many, became a powerful testament to the far-reaching impact of Maya's quiet courage. CTA 2. If you, like me, truly believe that one person, armed with integrity and a fierce will, can actually flip an entire broken system on its head, then don't just watch. Smash that subscribe button. Let's build a community that champions accountability. And if you're hungry for the nitty-gritty, the full breakdown of Maya's incredible evidence list, drop a yellow in the comments. I'll make sure to pin a link for you. Let's keep these crucial stories coming. Stories that remind us that justice, though sometimes slow, is always worth fighting for. Section 9. The courtroom, 1 week later. 1 week later, the same courtroom, the same hallowed space where Kincaid had once wielded his power like a blunt instrument, felt entirely different. The cracked gavel, that symbol of his downfall, was no longer on the bench. It lay encased in an evidence bag, a silent testament to its role in his undoing. Maya returned to that room, but this time, her role was reversed. She wasn't a defendant. She was a witness, a beacon of integrity. She wore a tailored navy suit, sharp and professional, a federal agent's badge clipped proudly to her hip. She was there to testify before a special master, a neutral arbiter appointed to oversee the dismantling of Kincaid's corrupt legacy. Kincaid himself was there too, a pale, diminished figure. He sat in a defendant's chair, stripped of his power, his dignity, and his robes. He wore a standard-issue orange jumpsuit, no belt, a stark contrast to the flowing black robes he once donned. He tried, repeatedly, to catch Maya's eye, to elicit some flicker of recognition, perhaps even pity. But she looked through him, her gaze steady, focused, as if he were merely another piece of furniture in the room. Her testimony was a masterclass in precision and composure. It took exactly 42 minutes, each word carefully chosen, each fact meticulously presented. Her voice, clear and unwavering, reduced the usually bustling courtroom to library silence. When asked by the special master why she had volunteered for such a dangerous and emotionally draining assignment, her answer resonated deeply. A quiet manifesto for justice. No one, she stated, her voice carrying absolute conviction, should be mocked for the shape of their name, the color of their sweater, or the size of their bank account. That's not justice, that's theater, and I'm not here for drama. A spontaneous burst of applause erupted from the gallery, a collective release of pent-up emotion. It was illegal, of course, a breach of courtroom decorum, but the bailiff, a man who had witnessed Kincaid's reign of terror firsthand, simply let it slide, a small act of defiance in itself. Outside, a swarm of reporters, microphones thrust forward, asked if she felt vindicated. Maya's response was characteristically pragmatic, devoid of ego. "Vindication is for movies," she answered, her gaze sweeping over the crowd. "I just want the docket to tell the truth." Section 10. The human cost. Maya almost didn't take the assignment. The stakes were personal, painfully so. Her older brother, Kareem, had been one of Kincaid's early, unwitting victims. He had been sentenced by the judge to 6 months in jail for missing a single bus fare payment. A minor infraction Kincaid had inflated into a severe punishment, a typical example of his disproportionate and cruel justice. Kareem, a hard worker, had lost his job while incarcerated, and subsequently his apartment. His life had been derailed by Kincaid's arbitrary cruelty. Now, Kareem channeled his experience into purpose, working as an outreach coordinator, tirelessly helping others overturn wrongful fines and navigate the labyrinthine legal system. Their mother, a woman of quiet strength, kept every single news story about Maya's case in a cherished scrapbook, its cover simply titled, "Pages That Finally Turned." Maya often said the hardest part of her undercover work wasn't the insults, the condescension, or even the constant fear of exposure. No, the hardest part was listening. It was listening to defendants, day after day, week after week, apologize for being poor, for being uneducated, for simply existing in a system designed to crush them. She heard their shame, their desperation, their quiet resignation, and it fueled her resolve. She keeps a voicemail, a precious, fragile recording, from a mother whose son's case, one of Kincaid's many unjust rulings, had been reopened as a direct result of Operation Gavelfall. The mother's voice, trembling with a mixture of relief and disbelief, whispered, "My baby called me from detention, saying, 'Mama, they're listening now. Thank you for not giving up on him.'" That message plays on a loop every night at 11:27 p.m., the exact time Kincaid slammed his gavel at her first contempt hearing, the moment she truly committed to his downfall. She listens, she cries, letting the raw emotion wash over her, and then she sleeps, her resolve renewed. Tomorrow, she starts undercover again. A new city, a new robe, a new wave of arrogance to dismantle. The fight for justice, she knows, is a continuous one. Section 11, the larger pattern. Kincaid, as egregious as his actions were, isn't some isolated outlier, some singular bad apple. He's a type, a chillingly common archetype within the justice system. A comprehensive 2022 Reuters audit, a truly eye-opening investigation, found a staggering 467 judges nationwide had accepted campaign money from private prison contractors, the very same entities Kincaid was in bed with. Of those, an alarming 268 ruled in favor of those contractors' interests at least 70% of the time. The correlation was undeniable, corruption systemic. And yet, only a paltry 3 of those judges faced any form of discipline. The system, it seemed, was designed to protect itself. Maya's case, however, is now case study 1 at DOJ training academies across the country. Agents, both seasoned and fresh-faced, watch the courtroom footage like coaches reviewing game tape. They meticulously analyze Kincaid's posture, Maya's bait, the precise timing of the reveal. They study her calm under pressure, her strategic use of legal knowledge, her unwavering commitment to the mission. Her supervisor, a veteran agent who has seen it all, aptly describes it as micro-courage in macro systems. The translation is simple, yet profound. Chip away at the cracks, relentlessly and precisely, until the entire foundation of corruption shows its instability. Maya herself keeps the cracked gavel head, Kincaid's broken symbol of authority, on her desk. It serves as a paperweight, a constant, tangible reminder of her victory, labeled simply, Hubris Exhibit A. Every new agent entering the Public Integrity Unit receives the same welcome gift, a simple yellow index card, mirroring the color of Maya's iconic sweater, bearing a profound, 4-word message: listen louder than you speak. It's a philosophy, a mantra, a silent testament to the power of observation, patience, and the quiet, unwavering pursuit of truth. Section 12, what happens next? The wheels of justice, though sometimes slow, are now grinding relentlessly for Ronald Kincaid. He faces up to 32 years in federal prison for his litany of crimes. His trials are slated to begin in October, a stark and public reckoning. In a bizarre twist of fate, Kincaid is reportedly attempting to pen a memoir, a self-serving narrative he's tentatively titled Gavel Down. He's been shopping it around to various publishers, convinced his story of victimhood will sell. So far, thankfully, there have been no takers. Meanwhile, in a more encouraging development, state lawmakers, spurred by the public outcry and the irrefutable evidence brought forth by Maya's investigation, passed what's now known as the Dawson Disclosure Act. This crucial piece of legislation forces judges to recuse themselves from cases involving campaign donors who contribute over $500. It's not a perfect solution, Maya acknowledges, but it's a significant start, a tangible step towards greater transparency and accountability in the judiciary. As for Maya herself, her exceptional work did not go unnoticed. Her promotion came through swiftly and decisively. Assistant Special Agent in Charge, Public Integrity Unit. At just 23 years old, she is already a force to be reckoned with, a rising star in the federal government's fight against corruption. When asked where she sees herself at 30, she laughed, a genuine, unburdened sound. Hopefully out of a job, she quipped, a twinkle in her eye, because the system won't need spies to police itself. Until that idealistic future arrives, she'll continue her quiet work, wearing her thrift shop sneakers, carrying a beat-up notebook that's older than some of the defendants she observes. Justice, she firmly believes, isn't some grand, dramatic pronouncement. It's stitched together from small, stubborn threads, like a bright yellow sweater, a tally mark on the inside of a Velcro shoe, and the symbolic crack in a corrupted gavel, one meticulous piece at a time. Conclusion. So, the next time someone tries to belittle you, to dismiss you for being young, for dressing brightly, for daring to speak up against injustice, remember, Maya, remember that true courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it stands quietly in a courtroom, hands perhaps trembling slightly, but voice calm and unwavering, while a powerful man laughs, believing himself untouchable. And then, remember the echo of that laugh, the sound of pure, unadulterated arrogance, abruptly turning into a gasp, a choked sound of disbelief, when the cold click of handcuffs signals the end. Justice isn't always loud or flashy. More often than not, it's patient, it's meticulous, and every now and then, just to make sure you really see it, it wears yellow. Thanks for watching. Stand up for those tiny threads of integrity. Share this story, and I'll see you in the next one, where arrogance always, eventually, meets its match.